Welcome, everyone. My name is Jacob. Thank you for joining me. This is Hunt Detail, and we're going to continue this week our conversation about elk hunt planning and preparation and all the nuance that sort of goes into that. Last week, we discussed mindset for the most part, and really how it connects to all aspects of your elk hunt plan. That includes your systems, whether that be your food system, your clothing system, your water system, your electronic system, the weight of your pack, your sleep system, your pack out system, all of that. Your mindset impacts your planning. It impacts your e-scouting, and that's what we're going to focus on today is e-scouting, because if you have physical limitations, then the scope of which you're going to be e-scouting is going to be limited as well. So hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully you're not setting those limits on yourself. You're expanding those limits. It's hard to believe that in really 4 months it's going to be early September, and that is crazy, honestly, to think about. That's not a lot of time to evolve, to change, to improve, because think about all that consumes a day. Of course, there's work and there's family commitments, there's vacations, and there's just general life things that take up a lot of time. And so how you plan your days and how you fit in your workouts, your shooting prep, your gear prep, all of that stuff is critical, because 4 months is a blink of the eye. So last year I went on a solo elk trip, and in many ways it was incredibly successful. It was my first solo trip. I was a little nervous about that, in full transparency, because if something goes wrong, it's all on me to figure it out. But I think it's a challenge that I want to continue to put myself in, a situation that I want to continue to put myself in. And really my ultimate goal is to pack out an elk on my own and do that experience. I think that would be fantastic. And last year I spent a lot of time e-scouting. I always do, but I'm always trying to elevate my e-scouting acumen. And what I'm going to share with you all is just my approach. It's by no means, I'm by no means any expert, but maybe there'll be a couple tips or tricks or whatever that you take from this. And for me, it's last year, I was in the game pretty much every day. And I know I talked to other hunters that were my age or younger with all the great equipment. And they even had some tips from other people. On my first morning, I met a couple of guys that had been hunting an area that I was going to hunt. They had been there for several days and weren't having any encounters, any bugles, nothing. And I thought that was really interesting. I mean, they were fit, they were young, they had all the gear, everything that you could think of, but they were struggling. And I went further back into this area. Where they were and where I parked were pretty close. That was sort of their base camp, and I moved into this part of the area. I felt like pretty deep, and dropped into a certain area, a bowl, and I found tons of elk sign, and eventually found elk on day 2, and it was several cows and a smaller bull. I would have definitely shot him. Could have shot one of the cows and passed on her because it was really my second day, and then pivoted. I bounced to another spot and which is strange because the phrase is when you find elk, you don't leave elk to find elk. But I left elk to find elk, and find elk I did. I actually pivoted to another area and was really in sort of a rut fest situation, and then found another pocket of elk that were rutting. And so all of that, now none of those situations came together. Bow hunting anything, quite honestly, is difficult. I mean, bow hunting whitetail deer, it can be a grind. It just, a lot of things have to happen in the right way, in terms of when you're hunting elk, when you're on the ground and you're solo and you don't have anybody calling behind you to sort of pull that in or make that happen. And I made some mistakes for sure. I'm still evolving and growing. There's several phases to that process, and I feel much more confident as I come into this year that in those situations, actually in a future podcast, I'm going to present you all with some scenarios, and you can sort of think about how you might react, and then I'll talk about some of the options. So we'll do some scenario-based approach to elk, but I think the success of it all was, again, there were other hunters that were struggling, and there was quite a bit of pressure. There were people everywhere, and some of these were a lot of hunters, but there were a lot of people just hiking and camping and that sort of thing. But the success of it on the other side of it, even though it's in many ways a failure not to fill a tag, I was in the game every day, every morning, every evening, and in the middle of the day at times when I had located bedding areas. And a lot of my success of that hunt was e-scouting that I had done. I had X's in certain spots, and when I got out there, I actually had elk at those X's, and that was a success. And I haven't really started doing that process yet this year because I haven't drawn a tag, but I feel confident when I do that I'll be able to accelerate and figure things out pretty quickly. What my approach is, and we'll go ahead and get started here, is if you really want to pull out to 10,000 foot and understand, at least my approach has always been understanding where the population densities of elk are in a particular state, and trying to look at the state's website, because a lot of things are being presented on Go Hunt or Hunting Fool, and they've taken their information from these state hunting websites and put it on their websites, and those are pay websites, but you can get a lot of information for free. And you go to pick any western state, they make public harvest rates and success rates, or number of hunters in certain areas. Some states are better at collecting that information than others, but that information is out there, and then you can get a sense of reports from biologists on population densities and what those populations look like. I remember in the state that I went last year, I did just that. I was evaluating reports that biologists had published on certain geographic areas in that state that I was hunting, and they were talking about the objective population being at, above, or below, or whatever. And so that gives you a sense of like, okay, there's elk there. That's great. That's what I want. And because I think sometimes when we look at states, if you have like a general tag, let's say like you have a tag for Montana, there's all these different units that you get to choose from. And it's like, well, I don't know. I don't know which ones have. So I start there. I also look at population densities of people. If you're hunting in a state like Montana, there's a couple different population hubs. If you can find a unit that you feel good about from a population density standpoint that's further away from some of these population hubs, then you're likely going to encounter less local hunters, maybe less local hiking pressure. There are also, as you look at these state websites, you can start to discern some of these high draw areas, these more popular areas, like, oh, this unit in this particular state is the unit that everybody wants to hunt. It might even have a name, like a nickname or a name. And of course, that a lot of that can be found on a Go Hunt or a Hunting Fool, both of which are resources that I use and sort of cross reference to get a sense of like, okay, what's going on in this particular state and in each of these particular units. And so I really start at a high level to break down a region, I suppose. And the then I use several months ago, I posted on the Hunt Detail YouTube channel a review of the different hunt map applications. So you have like an Onyx base map. Go Hunt has their own platform. Hunt Stand, Huntwise, Spartan Forge is one. And I did an exhaustive review on those platforms. I mean, and I have a spreadsheet that accompanies that review that you can download. If you just go to the Hunt Detail Instagram page, and there's a link in the profile. There's a bunch of different spreadsheets, but ultimately, really, I'll share some of the outcomes of that. Huntwise is an outstanding platform. It is flexible. It has flexibility for both the guy that lives out east and hunts whitetail, and then the guy that goes out of state once a year to hunt something else, hunt elk or mule deer or whatever. Huntwise, from a capability standpoint, is at the top. And then you have Onyx, and then I will say Spartan Forge has made some big steps forward. They're not quite there yet. In my opinion, there's still some holes there. And and Spartan Forge is definitely not a platform I would use out west like we're talking about today. So the platforms that I use most for my hunt planning are Onyx and Go Hunt. Onyx is primarily because I've just had it for so long and it's so feature rich. And Go Hunt because it is designed out. I mean, they're based out of Las Vegas. They focus primarily on Western hunting. So when I look at Onyx, I like to use the roadless area feature because it helps me, that layer helps me understand, okay, the darker the purple, the more difficult it is to get to by motor vehicle. So I'm looking at an area that is got shades of purple, and then that is remote in some ways. Now, there may still be potentially ATV trails or those sorts of things, but at least from a car standpoint, it limits folks from driving up and just flat out hunting. They have to cover ground because, again, going back to mindset and sort of hunt objective, it's I am going to be hiking by foot. I'm not going to be necessarily e-biking it. I'm not going to be on an ATV. And I'm not necessarily going to be hunting from my truck. So that's why I'm looking to those areas. And I sort of start there in some ways as I start to get into these mapping platforms. Now, with Google Earth, I'm using that in addition to Onyx almost side by side because I'm looking at the trailheads and understanding how much use those roads that are nearby are getting. Obviously, you can tell that if a road is not even, if you can't even see it, like you see sort of an outline of it on Onyx, because Onyx does have roads and trails as a layer, and then you don't see it on Google Earth, well, then you know that road's not getting a lot of use. Maybe it's an old logging road that's grown up, or if you have a road that it looks well used, or you may even see vehicles on Google Earth, and what you can do on Google Earth and on the Go Hunt platform, and I think Onyx is working on this, or maybe has a beta of this, is that you can change the dating of the images that you're looking at. So on Google Earth, I can go to September of 2018 or 2020 and see how much, are there vehicles parked there? I can also see what the terrain looks like. in the months of September. Um, I can also see if I move it to say a March time frame, I can see or April, I can start to see areas that start to green up sooner than others that would suggest that there is a water source. So maybe a spring on a mountainside. That's important to note. Access to water for game and access to water for you potentially. And so that's where I start from a high level of analysis, is just trying to look at what's going on in this space from a traffic standpoint, from a people pressure standpoint, from a uh, water, of course, standpoint. I want to look at the terrain just for what it is. Does this look like this could hold a lot of elk, or is it arid? Is it more open, or is it not that elk don't inhabit all sorts of different spaces, but I'm normally hunting areas with dark timber. So does this look? How does this look, and how does this compare? And so now, as I continue to move deeper into my e-scouting, I'm starting to look at elevation bands. And so Go Hunt has a tool that allows you to highlight uh, certain sets of elevation, and you can highlight north facing slope, south facing slope, east west facing slope. And so you can highlight those areas that are at a certain elevation. I want to go 6 to 9,000 feet, and I want north facing slopes. And so more north facing slopes tend to hold more moisture. They're less exposed to the sun because we're north of the equator. The sun is sort of south of us most of the day. And so if you've ever seen like moss on a tree, moss only grows on a certain side of the tree because it's not getting dried out. There's more moisture there. So it's the same concept here as north facing slopes, more lush potentially, and those are areas that I might target for elk. So the I start to look at the elevation bands, and also start to look at something that you can do on Google Earth is you can adjust the the height of the images that you are seeing. So you can exaggerate. You can exaggerate on Onyx as well. It's called an exaggeration tool. On Google Earth, it's a little bit more nuanced, and I would just type in Google Earth exaggeration, or but on Onyx you can exaggerate that terrain. And what you can start to do is on the Google Earth side, you start to see the terrain for really what it is, because a lot of times these mountains don't look that significant on Google Earth. They look like something that you could really like, oh, I can do that, no problem. But when you get there, it's much more intense. On the OnX side, when you exaggerate, it starts to show you or reveal subtle terrain features that you might not otherwise notice. And so again, I'm starting to drill down. Maybe I've identified a region, and now I'm starting to look at roadless areas, and now I'm looking at north-facing slopes and at these elevations, and now I'm starting to exaggerate terrain and look at, oh, there's a bench here, a saddle here, a bowl here that you wouldn't normally catch. And so now I'm starting to get more and more granular with my approach. I'm starting to of course identify roads and trails, and what I'll do is to begin the process of starting to create loops for each of my for each period of each day. So in the morning, this is a potential loop, and maybe it's a loop back to my vehicle, because I don't want to overcommit to an area. I don't want to go back 10 miles and realize that the elk just aren't here, and then I'm sort of committed to that area. I want to, if I'm going to do 10 miles, I'm going to do a 10-mile loop. And then I'll find another loop, and then I'll find another loop. And so each of those loops represent, really covering ground and trying to find where the game is, and so it's really a function of a continual drill down, and then creating sort of plans based on that, because it's a morning here, it's an afternoon loop here, it's a loop over here, and ultimately, hopefully, that first loop is hot, and I find elk. I'm in the mix, and I don't have to worry about these other loops. I don't have to worry about the rest of my plan. But the objective here is to create not just to get married. You don't want to get married to one loop or one area, even though it looks amazing. Maybe it has all the things that you want. And I like these basins that are sort of wide. You obviously want presence of water. You want them away from roads. You benches that are on the sides of this basin system that are maybe north facing. All of these things start to come together, and it could look amazing. But you don't want to get married to that area, because as you do, you only, when you get there and you only have that one plan or that one loop or that one area, then if it's got a bunch of people, or if it's dead, or if it's whatever, a combination of things, then you've already punched a hole in your enthusiasm for this hunt. It's like, oh, crud. What do I do now? And you are nowhere near Wi-Fi, or nowhere near. You might not even have cellular service. You definitely aren't going to be able to download new maps. And so, while the e-scouting portion is so critical, because you have to create everything several months in advance or weeks in advance, and then when you're there with boots on the ground, it's very difficult to pivot, because unless you've planned for those pivots. And so I am planning my loops, and I really don't have plan A or spot A, B, C, D, E, F. Every spot needs to be an A spot. Every spot needs to be something that this didn't work out. Well, that's awesome, because I have another spot that I really wanted to look at. And then, that spot fell through, or there's a lot of pressure here, or there's no elk here. That's okay, because over here, this north-facing slope has several benches, lots of water, and isn't near any ATV trails or anything of that nature. And so all of a sudden, it's now you have a high level of enthusiasm, even though you're running into roadblocks and miniature failures and those sorts of things. So that's where that's sort of where I start with e-scouting and sort of planning my hunt, is at that 10,000 foot view and starting to drill down. We'll continue this discussion in next week's podcast, as we'll drill down even further into some of this planning, because again, it is so critical that you don't drive 1,500 miles and only have one plan to go on. So do yourself a favor, if you haven't already. Start the process. Download, go to the Hunt Detail YouTube channel. Check out the video I did on the hunt map apps. You can get a sense of which ones you like or don't like. If you have one that you don't like, you can sort of evaluate things there. Download Google Earth to your computer. You can better evaluate things. Don't just use the web version. The Google Earth version is more robust. The desktop version is more robust than just the internet version. and you can actually save things to it. And next week, we'll talk a little bit about some things that you can add to Google Earth, some installs that make it more than just sort of a visual of the terrain or a 3D of the terrain. There's some ways that some things that you can add in to bring it even more to life and to help you with your e-scouting. So thank you all again for your time, your help, your support, and please like, share, subscribe, and best of luck the rest of this week. Bye-bye.